As a new parent, the excitement of bringing my first child into the world was overwhelming. The moment my baby girl, Lily, was born, I promised myself I would protect her at all costs. I took extra care, reading every parenting book and trying to follow all the advice from family and friends. I set up a nursery filled with soft pastel colors, a cozy crib, and the perfect little rocking chair. Life seemed perfect, or at least it did at first. The first few months went smoothly. Lily was a good baby, only crying when she was hungry, or needed a diaper change. But then things began to shift ever so slightly. One night, when she was about 6 months old, I woke up to a sound that chilled me to the bone. It wasn't her usual cries. It was a faint, almost inaudible whimper, one that seemed to come from far away. I thought I was imagining it at first, but then I heard it again. This time it was louder, and I could tell it wasn't coming from the crib. I leapt out of bed, my heart pounding in my chest. I rushed into Lily's room, flicking on the light. There she was in her crib, wide awake, staring at me with eyes that seemed far too old for a baby. There was no sound, no cry, nothing except her silent gaze. I checked her over, feeling her forehead, looking for signs of discomfort or illness. She seemed fine, but something about her expression unnerved me. It was as if she wasn't really seeing me at all. I tried to shake off the feeling, convincing myself it was just exhaustion playing tricks on my mind. But every night after that it happened again. Lily would wake up in the dead of night, staring at me with that eerie, silent gaze, no tears, no noise, just watching. It wasn't long before I noticed other strange things. Lily began to giggle, but not at anything in particular. She would laugh and coo, but her eyes would stay fixed on something just out of my sight. I would search the room, but there was never anything there. It wasn't long before the laughter became more unsettling, a deep, hollow sound that echoed through the nursery. My baby, who had once been so joyful, seemed to be responding to something invisible, something I couldn't see. I began to feel as though something or someone was in the room with us, watching, waiting, and every time Lily would giggle, the air would grow colder, as if the warmth of the room was being drained away. I couldn't understand what was happening, and the exhaustion of sleepless nights only made the paranoia worse. One night, after weeks of disturbed sleep, I couldn't take it anymore. I decided to call a pediatrician, hoping there was an explanation for Lily's odd behavior. When I spoke to the doctor, she asked if there had been any recent changes in our home or routine, any stressors. I couldn't think of anything that would have caused this sudden shift in Lily's behavior. But then, just before I hung up, the doctor's voice dropped low. "There's one thing you need to know," she said. "Sometimes babies see things that adults can't. They're still so close to the other side, and not everything they see is good." I hung up the phone, chilled to my core. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt like something was in the room with us, and when I opened them, there was Lily, smiling that eerie, too-old smile, her eyes fixated on something behind me. That's when I heard it again, the faint whimper, only it wasn't coming from Lily this time. It was coming from behind the door. I slowly walked toward it, heart in my throat. When I opened it, there was nothing there, but the sound of Lily's laughter filled the room, echoing from all corners of the nursery. I never figured out who, or what, had been watching us all along. But as time went on, Lily's behavior grew more and more unsettling. I stopped sleeping, stopped feeling safe in my own home, and eventually, I moved out. We had to leave everything behind, hoping that whatever it was would stay in that house. But I still hear that faint, silent cry in my nightmares. When my wife and I bought our new house, it was everything we had dreamed of. It had a large backyard, a wraparound porch, and enough room for our growing family. The house was old, with a history that intrigued us. The previous owners had lived there for over 40 years, and there were whispers of the house being haunted. But we didn't believe in such things. We saw the house as a bargain, and were eager to move in and start our life together. Shortly after we moved in, we began to unpack and settle in. Everything was perfect, until I went up into the attic. It was a hot, dusty space filled with old boxes and forgotten furniture. But it wasn't the clutter that caught my attention. It was the doll. It was an old porcelain doll with cracked features and a faded dress, sitting on a dusty shelf in the corner. I couldn't understand why it had been left behind, why anyone would keep such an eerie thing in an attic. But it wasn't just the doll's appearance that disturbed me. It was the feeling I had whenever I was near it. Every time I passed by the attic, I felt an inexplicable pull to look up at that shelf, to stare into the doll's empty eyes. I tried to ignore it, to dismiss the feeling, but it gnawed at me. The feeling only grew stronger when we had our first child, Emma. I'd been hesitant to let Emma go near the attic, but one day, while my wife and I were downstairs, I heard Emma laughing upstairs. It was the kind of laughter that made me smile. It was innocent, joyful, but when I went to check on her, my heart dropped. She was standing in front of the attic door, laughing and talking to someone or something. There was no one else in the room, but she was looking up at the attic stairs as if she was being spoken to. "Mommy, Daddy, the lady wants to play," she said, smiling. I froze in the doorway. "What lady?" I asked, my voice trembling. Her lady in the attic," she replied as if it was the most natural thing in the world. I rushed up the stairs, but when I opened the attic door, there was no sign of anyone. The doll was still sitting on the shelf, its cracked eyes staring at me. That night I had trouble sleeping. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard Emma's voice in my head, repeating the words, "The lady in the attic." And in the morning I found that the doll had moved, just slightly. Its head turned in a different direction. I couldn't explain it. I moved the doll out of the attic and hid it in the back of a closet, but the strange occurrences continued. Emma would talk to the air, would laugh at things that weren't there. The doll, though, remained silent. That was when I realized something was wrong. We weren't alone in that house. And whatever had been watching us had been there long before we moved in. It was supposed to be a normal Friday night, just a quiet dinner out, the first one my wife and I had shared since our son Ryan was born. We hadn't had a proper night to ourselves in over a year, and after some convincing from friends and family, we finally agreed it was time. My wife found a babysitter online who came highly recommended. Melissa, a sweet-natured 20-year-old college student with years of childcare experience. She showed up right on time, cheerful, polite, and carrying a well-worn satchel of coloring books, puzzles, and games to keep Ryan entertained. Everything about her felt safe, familiar, easy. We didn't think twice when we kissed our little boy goodbye and stepped out the door. Ryan had just turned 3. He was a happy, energetic child, chatty, full of curiosity, always on the move. But he'd started going through a shy phase around strangers, and I half expected Melissa to call an hour in with a request to come home early. Instead, the evening went off without a hitch. She didn't text or call. When we finally got back around 10:30 p.m., the house was quiet, and for a brief moment I felt grateful that we'd finally found someone we could trust, until I saw Melissa. She was sitting on the far end of the living room couch, arms wrapped around herself, eyes unfocused. The TV was off. The lights were dim. Her normally warm demeanor had vanished. She looked hollowed out, like someone who had seen something she couldn't unsee. My wife and I exchanged a worried glance. "Melissa," I said gently, "is everything okay?" Her head snapped up, like I'd just jolted her awake. She blinked at us as if trying to remember where she was. Yeah," she said, her voice brittle. "He's upstairs, sleeping." Something wasn't right. I felt it in the way her voice cracked, the way her hands trembled against her knees. "Did something happen?" my wife asked, stepping forward. Melissa hesitated. Her mouth opened, then closed again. She looked like she was struggling with the right words. I don't know how to explain it," she finally whispered. "But Ryan, he wasn't acting normal." That's when every parental instinct in my body kicked into overdrive. I sprinted upstairs, my wife right behind me. Ryan's bedroom door was ajar. The nightlight cast a soft orange glow across the walls, and his white noise machine hummed in the corner. But the bed was empty. My heart dropped. "Ryan?" I called out, my voice cracking with panic. I threw open the closet door, and there he was, sitting on the floor, cross-legged in the dark. He didn't flinch, he didn't even blink. "Buddy?" I crouched down, trying to smile. "What are you doing in here?" Ryan slowly turned his head toward me. His eyes met mine, and in that moment, I felt a jolt of something that chilled me to the bone. It wasn't fear, not exactly. It was more like recognition, like he knew something about me that I didn't. "You're not my daddy," he said softly. I froze. The voice was his. The words were his. But the tone wasn't. It was too composed, too deliberate, more like an adult mocking a child's cadence than a toddler speaking. I reached for him, gently lifting him from the floor. His skin felt colder than usual. My wife gasped behind me, and I turned around to see tears welling in her eyes. Back downstairs, Melissa was waiting, her coat already on. I handed her the payment, but she didn't take it. "I don't want the money," she said. "I just need to leave." I followed her out onto the porch. "Melissa, please, what happened tonight?" She hesitated on the steps. "He was fine. At first," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "We played with puzzles, read some books. Then he started looking at something behind me. I thought maybe there was a bug or a shadow on the wall, but he kept staring, like he saw someone." I swallowed hard. "Then he smiled," she continued, and said, "The man in the hallway wants to know your name." I nearly dropped the flashlight in my hand. "What man?" She shook her head. "I didn't see anyone. I even checked. But Ryan said he was standing in the dark part of the hallway. When I looked again, the light in the hallway had gone out." I stood frozen on the porch listening, the weight of her words sinking into my bones. "He said the man told him stories," she added, "that he whispers in his ear at night. And when I told Ryan it was bedtime, he screamed at me. Not like a tantrum. It was violent. He told me to go back to my hole in the dirt. Like, how would a 3-year-old even know to say something like that?" I didn't sleep that night. Ryan did, but it was the kind of sleep that looked unnatural. His face was too still. He didn't toss or turn, just lay there, unmoving. We took turns sitting by his crib, trying to rationalize what had happened. Maybe he was overtired. Maybe Melissa had misheard him. Maybe we were just reading too much into toddler nonsense. But the next day brought more strange behavior. Ryan started talking in odd, disjointed phrases. Things like, "The man says your breath smells like winter," or "He doesn't like when you look at him too long." He started drawing things too, dark scribbles of shadowy figures with long arms and hollow faces, things we had never exposed him to. That was when the house itself started to change. Doors we had closed would swing open again. Toys would be in different places than where we left them. At night, we would hear tapping sounds on the walls. Too rhythmic to be plumbing, too loud to ignore. One evening I walked past the hallway to find Ryan standing at the far end, facing the wall. "Ryan?" I said. He didn't respond. I walked up behind him and gently placed a hand on his shoulder. He spun around and hissed, "You're scaring him." "Scaring who?" He pointed toward the ceiling. "The man in the crawl space." We didn't have a crawl space. We called in a priest the next day. Neither my wife nor I were particularly religious, but we were desperate. The priest walked through the house, quietly praying under his breath. When he reached Ryan's room, he paused. He turned to us and asked, "Has your child said anything about something watching him?" We nodded, our throats dry. He frowned. "This room is very cold, and the energy here is dense." He performed a blessing, sprinkled holy water, and advised us to remove any antiques, mirrors, or inherited objects that might carry attachments. That night, the tapping on the walls turned to scratching. We packed a bag and stayed in a hotel for 2 weeks. When we returned, the house felt lighter. Ryan was calmer, though still quiet. He didn't mention the man again, and slowly the drawings stopped. But to this day, there are things we never figured out. We never learned where Ryan got the words he used. We never identified the cause of the tapping or the shadows. And Melissa never babysat again. Sometimes, when I walk past Ryan's room at night, I find him sitting up in bed, staring into the corner, just silently watching. I ask him what he's doing, and he always says the same thing, waiting. "For what?" I ask, but he never answers.